Before the smartphone, time did not press itself forward. It did not vibrate in pockets or glow in the dark. It did not demand to be checked. It did not arrive in fragments, scattered across a screen. Time moved in longer shapes. Waiting was not an interruption. Waiting was the default state. People waited for letters. They waited for visits. They waited for news. They waited for morning. And while they waited, life continued without urgency. There was a quiet understanding that not everyone could be reached. Not immediately. Not always. Sometimes. Not at all. This absence did not feel like neglect. It felt like distance, physical, ordinary, accepted. If someone did not answer, it meant they were elsewhere, walking, working, resting, sleeping. No explanation was required. Silence was not alarming. It was informational. Evenings unfolded slowly. When the day ended, it ended clearly. The light changed. The sound softened. Shops closed. Voices lowered. There was no endless extension of the day into the night. No glowing rectangles pulling attention forward. The evening had edges. People returned home not to reconnect with the world, but to withdraw from it. The home was not a node in a network. It was a boundary. Inside, time thickened. A clock ticked somewhere in the room, not as a reminder, but as a companion. Its sound blended with breathing, with the shifting of fabric, with the quiet scrape of a chair on the floor. Nothing competed for attention. Nothing scrolled. Letters existed, but they moved slowly. A letter did not interrupt the day. It arrived when it arrived. The act of writing required stillness, paper, ink, a place to sit. Thoughts were shaped by the pace of the hand. Words were chosen carefully, not because they would be judged instantly, but because they would be read later, perhaps much later. The delay changed the tone. Urgency softened into reflection. Visits were similar. You did not announce yourself continuously as you approached. You arrived, or you did not. If no one answered the door, it did not mean rejection. It meant absence. You returned another day. There was a shared patience built into these interactions. Life did not revolve around immediate response. People understood that they were temporarily unreachable, and that others were too. This mutual inaccessibility created space. Night arrived fully. Darkness was not something to push away completely. It was allowed to settle. Lamps were lit deliberately, one room at a time, one corner at a time. Light was placed, not spread. Shadows remained. The night was not filled with information. There were no updates waiting in the dark, no unseen messages accumulating. When the lights were low, the world receded, and that retreat was natural. The body recognized the signal. Darkness meant rest was approaching, not immediately, not forcefully, but gently. There was no pressure to stay connected. The day did not continue invisibly after bedtime. When people slept, they were absent, fully. No one expected them to respond while dreaming. Sleep was respected as disappearance. Minds settled differently in this environment. Thoughts were allowed to complete themselves. There was time to sit with a feeling without distraction. Time to follow a memory until it faded on its own. Nothing interrupted the process. Even boredom had weight. Boredom was not avoided. It was endured, explored, sometimes even enjoyed. In boredom, the mind wandered slowly. It did not jump. Silence filled rooms without explanation, not the anxious silence of being ignored, but the calm silence of nothing needing to happen. This silence did not ask questions. Waiting shaped behavior. Plans were looser. Expectations were softer. If something did not happen today, it would happen later. And if it did not happen at all, life continued anyway. There was less documentation of the moment. Moments existed without being recorded. They passed without proof. And that was enough. Nighttime especially belonged to this slower rhythm. After sunset, options narrowed. Activities became quieter. Voices lowered naturally, not because of rules, but because of the atmosphere. Darkness encouraged restraint. People noticed the passage of time through physical cues, cold in the air, fatigue in the body, the dimming of light, not through notifications. The day ended because it ended, not because it was replaced by another stream of content. In this world, waiting did not feel like loss. It felt like space. Space between events, space between words, space between people. And in that space, rest was possible. The night did not ask to be filled. It was allowed to remain empty. This emptiness was not loneliness. It was quiet presence. A room could be empty and still feel complete. People did not fear missing out because nothing was constantly happening elsewhere. Life occurred where you were. And if you were not present, it would occur without you, calmly. Sleep came without competition. There was nothing more important happening on the other side of a screen. No invisible audience. No urgency to check one last time. When eyes closed, the world paused. Not permanently, just enough. Morning would arrive again. News would arrive again. People would return again. There was no need to rush toward them. This was a world that could wait. Not because it was slow by accident, but because it was structured that way. And in that structure, people rested more deeply. Not because life was easier, but because it was quieter. The smartphone would later arrive and change this rhythm. But before it did, waiting had meaning. Silence had permission, and the night belonged to itself. The telephone did not follow people. For a long time, it stayed where it was placed. It rested on a table, or hung on a wall, or stood quietly in a corner of the house. It belonged to a location, not to a person. You did not carry it with you. You returned to it. The telephone was part of the home in the same way a doorway or a window was part of the home. It did not move through rooms. It waited. Often, it lived in a corridor. Sometimes in the kitchen, near the wall. In some houses, it stood on a small table by itself, as if it needed space around it. That space mattered. The telephone was not hidden, but it was not central either. It did not dominate the room. It simply existed. There was usually one telephone for everyone, one number, one device, one shared point of contact between the household and the outside world. This alone shaped behavior. When the telephone rang, it was not your call. It was the house's call. Anyone could answer. A voice from another room might say, "The phone is ringing," and footsteps would follow. Someone would stand up. Someone would walk. The act of answering required movement. You crossed space to reach it. That short walk mattered more than it seems. It gave the moment weight. You heard the ringing first. Then you decided whether to answer. Then you approached. There was no reflexive reach, no automatic response. You were already participating before the conversation began. The telephone sound traveled through walls. It echoed slightly in hallways. It mixed with the clink of dishes, with water running, with the muffled sounds of a house in use. It did not vibrate silently. It announced itself. And when it stopped ringing, It stopped completely. There was nothing left behind. No missed call icon. No lingering reminder. Just silence again. That silence between calls was the dominant state. The telephone spent most of its life doing nothing. Days could pass without it making a sound. And this was not considered unusual. The quiet was normal. People did not check the telephone. They did not wonder if it had something new to show them. It was inert until acted upon. When it rang, the interruption was clear and contained. A beginning, a middle, an end. A conversation was an event. You stood still while speaking. You leaned against the wall. You rested your elbow on the table. You twisted the cord slowly around a finger. The body adapted to the space. Voices lowered naturally, not because of etiquette, but because of proximity. The telephone was not used while walking. It anchored you. Your attention was gathered in one place. Other people in the house adjusted. Someone might leave the room. Someone might lower the radio. Someone might wait. The call was shared, even if the words were private. And when the conversation ended, it ended physically. You returned the receiver to its place. The click mattered. It was final. The sound of the receiver settling back into position closed the moment. There was no trailing presence of the conversation afterward. No message thread continuing invisibly. The wall held the silence again. Often, the telephone was close to familiar domestic textures, painted walls, wooden tables, linoleum floors. It absorbed the atmosphere of the home. It smelled faintly of the room it lived in. Cooking, soap, dust warmed by daylight. It did not glow. It did not pull the eye when it was inactive. It blended in. Children learned early that the telephone was not a toy, not because it was forbidden, but because it was uninteresting most of the time. Nothing happened when you touched it. It required another person far away, choosing the same moment. That dependency slowed everything. You could not use the telephone alone. It was relational by nature, and this shaped expectations. If someone did not answer, it did not mean they were ignoring you. It meant they were not near the telephone. They might be outside. They might be asleep. They might be busy. The explanation was physical. The absence made sense. People did not imagine the telephone traveling with them. They imagined the person being elsewhere. This mattered deeply. It kept distance real. You knew where communication lived and where it did not. The rest of the house was free from it. Bedrooms were often untouched by the telephone. Night remained quieter. If the phone rang late, it was rare enough to feel serious. Late-night calls carried weight because they broke a pattern. They were not routine. The telephone did not accompany you to bed. It did not wait on the nightstand. It stayed where it belonged. The corridor, the kitchen, the shared space, even the length of the cord shaped behavior. You could only move so far. You could stretch it slightly into another room, but never much. The cord reminded you of limits. You felt it pull. You returned. The body was never far from the object. This physical tether kept conversations grounded. People talked, then stopped. They did not drift endlessly. There was a sense that time was being used, not consumed, but occupied. When the call ended, you resumed whatever you had been doing before. Cooking continued. Reading resumed. Silence returned. Nothing followed you. The house absorbed the interruption and returned to its previous state. Walls held memories differently then. They heard conversations pass through them and then vanish. Nothing stayed. There were no archives of speech, only recollection. This made words lighter. They did not accumulate. They were not stored. They existed once, and then they were gone. The telephone did not invite repetition. You did not reread conversations. You did not replay them. They lived and dissolved. This gave them a particular softness. Even disagreements faded more easily. There was no record insisting they remain present. The object itself remained unchanged. It did not update. It did not evolve daily. Years could pass, and the telephone would look the same. It aged with the house. Its color dulled slightly. Its surface smoothed where hands touched it most. It belonged. In the evening, when light dimmed, the telephone became less visible. It did not assert itself. It waited for sound. And if no sound came, it accepted that. The house did not revolve around it. The day did not reorganize itself in anticipation of calls. People lived first. Communication arrived second. This order mattered. It meant that presence was local. What was happening in the room mattered more than what might be happening elsewhere. The telephone respected this hierarchy. It did not argue. It did not intrude unless invited by another human choosing the same moment. This mutual requirement slowed the world. It introduced friction, and that friction created space. Space to finish a task, space to complete a thought, space to remain unavailable without guilt. The telephone, fixed in place, allowed the rest of life to move freely. It was the still point, and around it, the house breathed. When night came, the telephone slept too. It waited with the walls, and if it remained silent, nothing felt missing, because silence was the default, and the house, without needing to respond to anything, rested as well. Early mobile phones were not companions. They did not live in the hand. They did not wait on the table. They did not glow when nothing was happening. They were carried with intention, and often not at all. The idea of a phone that could move was new, but the way it was used remained old. The device changed location, yet behavior stayed cautious. Mobility existed without closeness. A mobile phone was an instrument, like a tool placed in a bag, used when necessary, put away when finished. It did not ask to be checked. Most of the time, it was off, not silent. Off. This mattered. Turning a phone on was a decision. Turning it off was normal. People did not expect to be reachable continuously. They expected gaps, long ones. The phone existed for moments, not for hours. A call was made with purpose. A reason had to justify the battery, the cost, the effort. You thought before dialing, not because you were limited by technology, but because the phone demanded restraint by its nature. The device was heavy, not just in weight, but in presence. You knew when you were carrying it. It sat in a bag or in a coat pocket, separate from the body. It did not merge with you. You could forget it somewhere without anxiety, because forgetting it meant little would happen in your absence. Calls were rare. When the phone rang, it felt significant. It cut through the environment sharply, not because it was loud, but because it was unexpected. Public spaces were not designed for private calls. A ringing phone drew attention. People looked up. Someone stepped aside. There was a brief awkwardness, not shame, just awareness. The phone reminded you that communication was interruptive, and interruptions were noticeable. You did not scroll while waiting. There was nothing to scroll. No feeds, no updates, no silent activity. When the phone was not ringing, it was dormant. It did not occupy the mind. It did not fill pauses. Pauses remained empty. Waiting stayed intact. Often, the phone was turned off to preserve power. Battery life was not an invisible system working in the background. It was a visible limit. You knew roughly how much energy remained. You adjusted behavior accordingly. Calls were shortened. The phone was not used casually. It was protected. Chargers were not everywhere. Charging required planning, an outlet, time, stillness. This reinforced distance. The phone did not belong to every place. It belonged where electricity was. Away from those places, it slept. This created natural disconnection. People moved through the day unreachable by default. And this did not feel like absence. It felt like normal life. The phone followed the person physically, but it did not follow attention. Attention stayed where the body was, on the street, in the room, at the table. The phone did not compete. There was no background usage, no constant low-level engagement. Either you were using the phone or you were not. Nothing existed in between. This clarity mattered. It kept boundaries visible. The beginning of a call was obvious. The end was final. There was no continuation, no afterimage. When the call ended, the phone returned to silence. It did not suggest anything else to do. There were no choices presented, no next step. The phone did not create desire. It fulfilled a function and then withdrew. Many people left their mobile phones at home, deliberately. Not because they wanted to disconnect, but because there was no strong reason to carry it. Nothing depended on it. Life did not reorganize itself around availability. Plans remained flexible. If someone could not be reached, the explanation was simple. They were elsewhere, moving, living. The phone's absence matched reality. Even when carried, it stayed out of sight. Not placed face up, not positioned carefully. It stayed hidden, out of mind. The body did not orient toward it. Hands were free. Eyes were unoccupied. The phone did not become a surface for thought. It was a point of access, not a space. The idea of checking a phone did not exist. There was nothing to check. You waited for it to act first. This reversed the relationship. The device did not wait for you. You waited for it, and often nothing happened. This inactivity did not feel like deprivation. It felt like calm. There was no pressure to fill silence. Public transport remained quiet. Waiting rooms remained still. People looked outward or inward. They did not disappear into devices. Movement stayed physical. You walked without documenting. You traveled without updating. The phone did not translate experience into data. It remained separate. At night, the phone rarely entered the bedroom. If it did, it stayed powered down. It did not glow. It did not interrupt sleep. If it rang late, it meant something important, not routine. Urgency was rare enough to retain meaning. The phone did not flatten emotional weight, because not every moment was reachable. The absence of constant access preserved proportion. Small things stayed small. Important things stood out. Battery conservation shaped behavior in subtle ways. People became aware of duration. They sensed time passing. They noticed how long something took. The phone encouraged economy, not of money alone, but of attention. Attention was spent carefully, not leaked continuously. There was no reward for looking at the device, no stimulation waiting behind the screen. The phone did not entertain. It waited. This waiting was shared. The device waited. The user waited. Nothing rushed. Technology did not accelerate rhythm yet. It loosened location without tightening grip. Movement became possible without attachment forming. This balance did not last forever, but for a time, it existed. a narrow moment where mobility expanded without dissolving boundaries, where communication traveled farther but not deeper into the body, where the phone extended reach but not presence. The device was helpful, but it was not intimate. It did not sleep with you. It did not wake with you. It did not know you. It did not ask. It did not remember. It did not care. And because of that, it remained light. Easy to put down, easy to forget, easy to turn off. In this period, silence still dominated. The phone occupied edges of life, not its center. It accompanied movement, but it did not shape it. And when nothing happened, which was most of the time, that nothing felt complete. The phone did not promise more. It did not hint at unseen activity. It simply waited, and in that waiting, life continued at its own pace. Slow, uneventful, undisturbed. Movement existed, but attachment had not yet formed. The phone could move, the mind stayed still, and the day remained mostly untouched. When screens first appeared on phones, they did not feel like windows. They felt like labels, small surfaces, dim surfaces, surfaces that existed to show something briefly and then disappear again. The screen was not the center of the object. It was an addition, a quiet rectangle embedded into plastic, often gray, sometimes greenish, sometimes barely lit at all. You did not look at it unless you needed to, and even then, you looked only for a moment. The screen did not invite attention. It accepted it reluctantly. It showed just enough, a number, a word, a symbol. Nothing moved, nothing refreshed itself, nothing waited behind what you could already see. Information was sparse by design, not because engineers wanted restraint, but because restraint was unavoidable. The screen could not hold much, and so it did not try. There were no layers, no depth, no sense of elsewhere. What appeared on the display existed only there, only then. When the screen went dark, everything vanished completely. This made the screen feel temporary, like breath on glass, present for a moment, gone the next. The light itself was modest. It did not spill into the room. It did not reflect off walls. It did not announce itself across distance. In a dark space, the screen was visible only if you were already looking directly at it. It did not pull your gaze. It waited to be met. At night, this mattered. Darkness remained dominant. The room stayed dark even when the screen was on. Shadows held their shape. Corners remained invisible. The screen did not replace the night. It existed within it. Often, the screen was backlit weakly, unevenly, some parts brighter than others. You could see the edges of the technology. You could sense its limits. This imperfection softened its presence. The screen felt mechanical, not magical. It did not pretend to be more than it was. Because the display was monochrome, everything looked similar. There was no hierarchy of color to guide attention, no red urgency, no blue calm, no visual drama. Everything was equal. This flattened experience kept emotion low. Messages did not feel charged. They felt informational. The screen showed facts, not moods. A missed call looked almost the same as a received one. Time did not shout. Nothing pulsed. The screen did not glow when idle. It remained dark, off, inactive. It did not wake up unless you asked it to. And even then, it often required effort. A button pressed firmly, sometimes twice, sometimes held. The phone did not respond instantly. There was a slight delay, a pause, a moment where nothing happened. This pause mattered. It slowed expectation. You did not flick the screen on without awareness. You waited, and in waiting, you remained present. The screen did not become a habit. It did not fill gaps unconsciously. You did not check it while thinking. You did not look at it while waiting for something else, because it offered nothing unless summoned deliberately. When you finished looking, you turned it off again. Darkness returned immediately. There was no lingering glow, no soft fade, just absence. This kept boundaries clean. The screen existed only when in use. The rest of the time, it was nothing. This nothingness protected attention. It allowed the environment to remain dominant. Sounds mattered more. Temperature mattered more. The weight of the phone in your hand mattered more than what was displayed on it. The screen was secondary. The object came first. In many situations, the screen was barely legible. In bright daylight, it disappeared. In low light, it required focus. You adjusted your position to see it. You did not adjust the world. This reversed the relationship that would come later. The screen adapted to life, not the other way around. At night, the screen felt especially small. Surrounded by darkness, it looked fragile, contained. It did not compete with the room. It did not redefine space. The night remained larger, more complete. The screen did not erase silence. It existed within silence. No sound accompanied it. No subtle clicks, no vibrations. Just light, briefly. Then none. This kept interaction minimal. The phone did not invite prolonged engagement. You checked something. You closed it. You returned to whatever you had been doing, reading, walking, waiting. The screen did not interrupt thought. It did not fragment attention. It inserted itself briefly and then withdrew. This gave the mind time to settle. Thoughts were not constantly broken. They reached natural conclusions. Pauses stayed intact. Even the physical act of looking at the screen required stillness. You stopped moving. You stood somewhere. You focused. Then you stopped. The screen did not accompany motion. It required pause. This inverted later habits. Here, movement stopped to allow the screen, not the other way around. Because the display showed so little, imagination filled the gaps. A missed call was just a missed call. Not a story, not a cascade of assumptions. The screen did not suggest interpretation. It simply stated. This simplicity reduced mental noise. There was less to process, less to remember, less to revisit. The screen did not store the day. It did not archive your life. It did not hold traces of attention. It showed, then forgot. And so did you. This forgetting was gentle. Nothing insisted on being recalled. At night, the phone was often placed face down, not to hide anything, just because orientation did not matter. The screen was not meant to be seen unless activated. It did not call out from the dark. It stayed dark. The night stayed darker. Darkness retained its authority. The body still read the room correctly. Low light meant rest. The screen did not confuse signals. It did not extend the day artificially. It did not blur the line between evening and night. When the screen was off, the night returned completely. There was no glow lingering on the ceiling, no reflection on the wall. The room breathed normally. This mattered for sleep. The mind was not stimulated visually. The eyes were not asked to stay open. The phone did not compete with tiredness. It respected it. Because the screen was small, it did not contain worlds. It contained instructions, information, utility. It did not transport you elsewhere. You remained where you were. Your body did not disappear. Your surroundings stayed present. The screen did not replace reality. It supplemented it briefly, and then it stepped back. This created a rhythm. Look, no, stop. a rhythm that allowed the rest of life to remain continuous. The phone did not fracture experience. It punctuated it lightly, and between these punctuations, there was nothing new. Just the same room, the same air, the same quiet. Screens were small enough to be ignored, quiet enough to be forgotten. They did not shape evenings. They did not reshape nights. They existed without ambition. They showed what was necessary, nothing more. The night remained darker than the screen. The room remained larger than the device, and attention remained mostly undisturbed. This balance would not last, but for a time, screens knew their place. They did not shine. They did not call. They did not expand. They waited, and when they were no longer needed, they disappeared into darkness again, leaving the night as it had always been, still, wide, unlit. The change did not arrive loudly. There was no single moment when the phone announced that it had become personal. No sharp turn, no clear beginning. It happened quietly, through proximity. The phone began to stay closer, not because it was demanded, but because it fit. It slipped into a pocket. It rested on a table. It appeared beside the bed. At first, this closeness felt practical. Having the phone nearby saved time, reduced steps, removed small inconveniences. You no longer had to leave the room to check something. You no longer had to return to a fixed place. The phone adapted to the body, and slowly, the body adapted back. The object that once waited began to accompany. It followed without insisting. It did not pull attention yet. It simply remained present. Presence alone was enough to change the rhythm. When something is always nearby, it begins to be included without intention, not used constantly, just included. On the table while eating, on the desk while working, on the nightstand while resting. Its position became familiar. You did not notice it anymore. That familiarity softened boundaries. The phone stopped being an event. It became a condition, something that was simply there. Each phone now belonged to one person. This was not immediately emotional. It was logistical. Contacts were stored, settings adjusted, preferences remembered. But even these small personalizations shifted the relationship. The screen began to reflect a single life, not a household, not a shared space. One person, one history. The phone no longer mediated between places. It mediated between moments. You carried not just a device, but continuity. The phone remembered where you left off. It held fragments. A message paused, a note unfinished, a thought half-formed. You could return to it later. Later became easier. Later became closer. The screen changed accordingly. It no longer showed only information. It began to show selections, things chosen for you, or by you, or shaped by repetition. The screen started to feel familiar in a new way, recognizable, predictable, comforting. You did not have to think about where to look. What appeared felt expected. This reduced effort, and with less effort came longer stays. Not intense, not dramatic, just longer. The phone did not demand attention. It offered continuity. You could step away from the world and return without friction. That smoothness mattered. It made the phone feel less like an interruption and more like a surface where life could rest momentarily. The phone stayed close during transitions, between rooms, between tasks, between thoughts. It filled small gaps, not aggressively, quietly, waiting in the background. Its presence smoothed time. Sharp edges softened, moments blended. The phone did not replace anything. It sat alongside. On the bed, it rested near sleep. Not always used, just nearby. At night, this proximity changed the atmosphere. The room was still dark, the house still quiet, but something remained awake, not active, just ready. The phone lay face down, or face up. Either way, it was there. You did not have to get up to reach it. You did not have to cross space. This reduced the sense of distance. Distance itself became optional. Communication no longer lived elsewhere. It lived within reach. The body learned this. Hands rested differently. Eyes shifted instinctively. The phone became part of the spatial awareness of the room, like a lamp, like a book, like a glass of water. It joined the small constellation of objects that surround rest. The screen, now personal, began to hold more than utility. It held traces of taste, images saved, words chosen, patterns formed. Two people could hold identical devices and see entirely different worlds. This individuality was subtle. It did not announce itself, but it shaped experience. The phone became a mirror, not in appearance, but in rhythm. What you looked at often appeared more. What you ignored faded. The screen learned quietly, and because it learned, it felt attentive, not alive, not conscious, just responsive. This responsiveness deepened familiarity. You did not feel watched. You felt accompanied. The phone was not another person, but it began to feel less like an object, not because it acted, but because it adapted. Objects that adapt invite closeness. They feel less fixed, less distant. The phone still rested in your hand, still weighed something, still cooled or warmed to touch, but it also carried something less tangible. Continuity. You could pause life and resume it. This changed how moments ended. They no longer needed closure. You could leave something unfinished and trust it would wait. This trust extended the day. Evenings blurred gently, not stretched, just softened. There was no clear end to engagement, just gradual slowing. The phone did not signal bedtime. It did not resist it either. It stayed. It waited. Near the bed, it became the last object seen and the first object within reach. Not always used, just present. This presence altered silence. Silence was no longer complete absence. It had potential. Something could happen, but often nothing did. And that nothing felt different, less empty, more suspended. The phone did not force interaction, but it removed finality. Moments no longer closed completely. They rested half open. The screen, personal and familiar, reduced friction between states, between activity and rest, between connection and solitude. You could be alone without being unreachable. You could be quiet without disappearing. This balance felt gentle, reassuring. There was no accusation in it, no demand, just availability. The phone did not insist on being used, but because it was always near, it became easy to include. The hand moved without thought, not urgently, casually. The gesture became habitual, not obsessive, just known, like touching a pocket to check for keys. The phone confirmed presence, not of others, of itself. It was still there, and because it was still there, it belonged. Belonging is powerful. Objects that belong are trusted. They are allowed into private spaces, onto beds, into pockets, into silence. The phone did not earn this trust through persuasion. It earned it through consistency. It stayed. It responded. It remembered. Slowly, it became part of how presence was measured. Not replacing people, not replacing rooms, just accompanying. The screen, now personal, reflected a single stream of attention, not endless, just continuous. You could leave and return. The phone would hold your place. This made time feel less demanding. You did not have to finish everything. You could pause. Pausing became normal. This normalization softened urgency, not eliminated it, just reduced its sharpness. The phone did not rush you. It waited as long as you did. This mutual waiting created a quiet intimacy, not emotional, not dramatic, practical, comfortable. The object no longer stood apart. It lived with you, on your schedule, in your spaces, following your rhythms. And because of this closeness, it began to feel less like technology and more like furniture, something that shapes movement simply by being there. You moved around it. You placed it carefully. You noticed when it was missing. Its absence felt strange, not alarming, just noticeable, like a missing watch or an empty pocket. The phone had become part of the outline of the day. It did not control the day, but it traced it, following, recording lightly, holding fragments. The screen no longer felt small, not because it grew, but because it carried continuity. It was no longer a window you glance through. It was a surface you return to, again and again, not urgently, not obsessively, just naturally. The object remained quiet, but its silence now felt different. It was a silence that could be broken easily, and because it could be broken, it was less final. This softened nights, extended evenings, blurred endings, without force, without judgment. The smartphone became personal, not by changing what it did, but by changing where it stayed. Closer, always closer. And in that closeness, presence itself shifted, not lost, not replaced, just accompanied. The phone did not become the center, but it stopped being the edge. It moved inward, into pockets, onto tables, beside beds, and there, without asking, it stayed. Quiet, familiar, present. Night changes a room before anything else does. The walls do not move. The furniture remains where it was, but darkness rearranges space quietly. Corners soften, distances stretch, details withdraw. When the lights go out, the room becomes larger than it was during the day, even though nothing has physically changed. And in that darkness, one small source of light appears. A phone screen. Not bright, not dramatic, just present. It does not flood the room. It does not erase shadows. It creates a small island of visibility in an otherwise quiet sea of dark. The phone rests somewhere close, on the bed, on the nightstand, in a hand that is no longer fully awake. The room is silent, not the heavy silence of absence, but the ordinary silence of night, the kind of silence that does not ask to be filled. The screen lights up, and for a moment, it is the only moving thing, the only thing that changes. Everything else remains still. The ceiling does not respond. The walls do not react. The air stays the same. Only the screen shifts. A slow scroll, a subtle transition, light changing shape quietly. This movement is gentle, not urgent. It does not demand attention so much as it accepts it. The eyes adjust. The brightness is low. The light is cool, but soft enough not to sting. It does not wake the body. It accompanies it. In this state, the phone becomes something else. Not a tool, not a device, a lamp. A modern lamp that does not illuminate the room, only a small area of focus. A lamp that shows motion instead of casting shadows. The phone does not light the night. It punctuates it. The darkness remains dominant. The screen is contained. It does not leak far. Shadows stay intact. The edges of the room remain unknown. The night keeps its shape. The body responds to this balance. Muscles loosen. Breathing slows. The screen does not require posture. You do not sit up. You do not lean forward. You lie still. The phone adapts to rest. Content moves slowly. Images slide past without urgency. Words appear and disappear. Nothing insists on completion. There is no pressure to reach the end of anything. The screen does not feel like a destination. It feels like a companion to stillness. The quiet movement gives the mind something to follow without effort, not enough to engage fully, just enough to prevent sharp thoughts from forming. This is where the night screen lives, between attention and rest, between wakefulness and sleep. The room remains dark enough that the screen feels small, fragile, temporary. If it were to turn off, nothing would be lost. The night would continue without interruption. This knowledge makes the screen lighter, less demanding. The phone does not compete with sleep. It drifts alongside it. There is a strange comfort in this, not comfort in connection, but comfort in presence. The sense that something is there without asking anything from you. The screen moves, but you do not move with it. You stay still. Your body sinks deeper into the bed. The phone does not follow. It waits. The glow reflects faintly on skin. A cheek, a hand, the edge of a pillow. These reflections are brief. They fade as soon as the angle changes. The light leaves no mark. The room remains unchanged. The phone as a night lamp does not announce time. It does not show hours passing loudly. It does not ring. It does not vibrate. It glows. It moves. That is all. The night becomes softer around it. Silence wraps itself around the motion. The contrast is calming. Movement within stillness. Light within dark. This balance keeps the mind from wandering too far. Thoughts slow down. They stop branching. They stop racing. They begin to drift. There is no urgency to respond. No expectation of interaction. The screen is not a conversation partner. It does not wait for replies. It does not react emotionally. It exists independently of you. And this independence is important. It removes responsibility. You are not needed. You are not expected. You can watch without participating, or not watch at all. You can let the screen move while your eyes close. It will continue without you. This makes sleep easier. The body senses that nothing depends on wakefulness. The phone does not require supervision. It does not need completion. It can be left mid-motion. The night screen allows for abandonment. You can leave without consequence. In the dark room, loneliness can surface. But here, it does not arrive with drama. It arrives quietly, like the room itself. Loneliness at night is not always pain. Sometimes it is just the absence of interaction. The phone does not fill this absence. It softens it. It provides a gentle presence that does not pretend to be human. It does not replace another body. It does not simulate closeness. It simply exists nearby. This is a different kind of comfort, not emotional reassurance, environmental reassurance, the sense that the space is not empty. The room has a small point of activity. The screen's movement gives the night a pulse, slow, steady, predictable. This pulse does not demand attention. It does not speed up. It does not surprise. It repeats. Repetition is soothing. The mind recognizes patterns and relaxes. The screen becomes part of the background rhythm, like a distant train, like wind outside, like a clock in another room, something happening without involving you. This distance is important. The screen is close physically, but distant mentally. It does not pull you toward it. It stays where it is. The eyes begin to close longer between glances. The screen blurs. Motion becomes suggestion. Light becomes color without shape. The phone does not fight this. It does not flash. It does not interrupt. It continues calmly. The room grows quieter. Even if the phone has sound, It is low, soft, even, no sharp edges, nothing that breaks the atmosphere. The sound does not travel far. It stays close to the bed, contained, like the light. The phone as a night lamp does not awaken the house. It stays personal, private. The rest of the world remains asleep. This separation matters. You are not connected outward. You are enclosed. The night screen becomes a bridge, not between people, between states, between being awake and being asleep, between thought and rest. It allows a gradual transition, no sudden drop, no abrupt end, just a slow fading. The body appreciates this. The nervous system recognizes the gentleness. There is no threat, no alert, no demand, just light moving quietly. The phone does not judge wakefulness. It does not push you to sleep. It simply remains. Loneliness at this hour feels different. Without daylight, it loses urgency. It becomes neutral, a condition, not a problem. The phone does not solve it. It acknowledges it without commentary. The screen does not ask why you are alone. It does not suggest alternatives. It does not point outward. It stays. This staying is enough. The night grows heavier, not oppressive, protective. The darkness presses softly against the room. The screen becomes dimmer as eyes tire. Or perhaps it stays the same and perception changes. It does not matter. What matters is that nothing escalates. The phone remains a lamp, a small contained source of light and motion. Eventually, the screen turns off, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Sometimes sleep arrives first. The light disappears, and the room remains dark, complete. The phone does not protest. It does not restart. It does not insist. It accepts the end. This acceptance is what makes the night screen effective. It does not fight sleep. It accompanies it. The room breathes. The night closes in gently. The phone rests where it was. Silent now. Dark. Just an object again. The loneliness, if it was there, does not spike. It settles. It becomes part of the night. Not tragic, not heavy, just present, like the dark itself. The night screen fades. The night remains. And sleep arrives without announcement, without interruption, without demand. The room returns to stillness, and nothing feels missing. Only quiet, only rest, only night. At some point, the smartphone stopped asking to be the focus. It did not announce this change. It simply happened. The phone began to exist in the background, not used deliberately, not ignored completely, just on. The screen lit without ceremony. A hand moved almost without thought. The device woke up and stayed awake. There was no clear reason, nothing specific to check, nothing urgent to see. The phone was on because it could be. This state felt different from use. Use has intention. Background does not. The screen was no longer a destination. It became atmosphere. Videos played without sound. Images moved silently, detached from meaning. A person walking, a hand stirring something, a landscape sliding by. No context needed. The absence of sound softened everything. Movement without voice did not demand understanding. You did not need to follow. You could glance, then look away. Nothing was lost. The video continued without you. This was important. The phone no longer required participation. It allowed partial presence. Eyes drifted between the room and the screen, sometimes resting on neither. Attention loosened. It did not hold tightly to any one thing. The feed had no goal. There was no expectation to reach the end. Scrolling did not promise arrival. Each movement replaced the last, quietly. No climax, no resolution, just continuation. This continuation created a kind of softness. Time blurred slightly. Minutes passed without shape, not fast, not slow, unmarked. The phone did not mark time. It filled it lightly. The screen was something to return to between thoughts, or something to leave running while thinking elsewhere. It did not interrupt silence sharply. It replaced it gently, a low-level presence, like a fan in another room, like traffic far away, not loud enough to command attention, not quiet enough to disappear completely. This background noise changed the feeling of the room. Silence became optional, not absent, just diluted. The phone did not silence the environment. It layered over it. The room was still there. You could hear the clock, the house settling, breathing. The screen existed alongside these sounds, sometimes overpowering them slightly, sometimes fading behind them. This fluctuation kept awareness loose. Nothing insisted on being the primary focus. The phone stayed nearby, on the table, on the bed, on the couch, always visible, but rarely commanding. The eyes learned to glance without commitment, to look without engaging, to notice without processing. This kind of attention is shallow, but calm. It does not exhaust. It does not excite. It spreads evenly. The phone in the background did not feel like a task. It did not require finishing. You did not feel behind. There was no sense of progress or failure, just presence. A screen moving quietly while life continued. Hands might fold laundry, or rest, or trace patterns on fabric. The phone stayed on, sometimes forgotten, sometimes remembered, but never central. The content itself became less important. What played mattered less than the fact that something was playing. The movement reassured. It suggested activity without requiring response. The mind could drift safely. Thoughts could come and go without interruption. The phone absorbed the excess attention. It caught the small impulses, the urge to check something, the need for slight stimulation. And because it was always available, it became less urgent. There was no rush. The screen would still be there. This changed the quality of waiting. Waiting was no longer empty, but it was not full either. It was filled lightly, like air. The phone did not fill the room with meaning. It filled it with motion, motion without direction. This reduced pressure. There was nothing to interpret, nothing to remember, nothing to respond to. The background phone did not speak to you. It spoke around you. You could tune it out or in without effort. The body stayed relaxed. The eyes softened. Blinking slowed. The screen blurred slightly at the edges. The phone did not mind. It did not sharpen itself to regain attention. It continued as before. This non-reactivity mattered. The phone did not compete. It did not escalate. It did not ask for more. It stayed consistent. Consistency is calming. The background presence removed the sharp contrast between activity and rest. You could be half active, half resting. The phone supported this in-between state, a state without labels, without demands. In this state, silence felt different, not absent, but padded, protected. The phone created a buffer, a layer between the mind and complete stillness. For some, this buffer was comforting, not because silence was frightening, but because it was vast. The background screen narrowed it slightly, made it manageable. Loneliness, when it appeared, felt less exposed, not hidden, just accompanied. The phone did not replace anyone. It did not simulate conversation. It simply reduced the sense of emptiness. By existing, the background noise did not judge. It did not suggest improvement. It did not comment. It stayed neutral. This neutrality is important. There was no pressure to react emotionally, No stories unfolding that required empathy or decision. Just motion, light shifting, images passing. The phone did not keep memories. You did not remember what you saw. It did not matter. Nothing accumulated. This lack of accumulation kept the mind light. There was no backlog, no unfinished thread. When the phone turned off, nothing felt interrupted. Nothing was cut short. It simply ended. The background state allowed easy exit. No sense of loss. No feeling of missing something important. Because nothing important was happening. This was its comfort. The phone in the background did not compete with the room. The room remained primary. The bed still supported the body. The air still moved. The night still progressed. The phone existed within these realities, not above them. Sometimes the phone was set down face up. Sometimes face down. It did not matter. Orientation lost meaning. The screen was no longer meant to be watched closely. It was meant to exist. This shift changed posture. You did not lean toward the phone. You leaned away. You reclined. You settled. The phone adjusted. It did not require eye contact. You could close your eyes. The soundless movement continued. It did not wake you. It did not stop you. It simply remained. This allowed sleep to approach gradually, not suddenly. The phone as background made transitions smoother, between tasks, between thoughts, between states. The mind did not have to jump from activity to rest. It could slide. The phone absorbed the friction. This absorption was quiet, unnoticed. The phone did not take credit. It did not announce its role. It simply stayed. Background attention does not feel like attention. It feels like absence of tension, the absence of the need to choose, the absence of the need to focus. The phone made this absence easier to inhabit, without instruction, without guidance, just by being there. Over time, this background presence became familiar, normal, expected, a screen somewhere in the room, not central, not ignored, just part of the environment, like furniture, like light, like distant sound. The phone as background did not alter identity. It did not define behavior. It softened edges. It reduced sharp contrasts. It made the day less segmented, the night less abrupt. This softness is why it remained. Not because it was exciting, but because it was gentle. The phone did not demand that you care. It allowed you not to. And in that allowance, attention dissolved. Not into nothing, into calm. The screen continued. You did not. Eventually, you stopped noticing it. The room reclaimed focus. Or perhaps focus disappeared altogether. And in that absence, rest became possible. The phone in the background did not announce the end. It did not mark a conclusion. It simply faded, sometimes still on, sometimes already dark. It did not matter, because by then, attention was no longer attached to anything. It had spread out, softened, settled, and the phone, having done nothing in particular, remained quietly where it was. Part of the room, part of the night, without asking for more. Time used to have edges. It began somewhere. It ended somewhere else. Morning arrived. Evening closed the day. Night marked a pause. These boundaries were not precise, but they were felt. You sensed when something was starting. You sensed when it was finished. The body recognized these moments without instruction. At some point, this certainty thinned. Not suddenly, not violently, gently. Time did not disappear. It lost its shape. There was no clear beginning to what you were doing, no clear ending either. The phone was already on, or it turned on without intention. Scrolling did not start. It simply continued. The movement of the screen had no opening gesture. No moment of arrival. You did not step into something. You drifted. Images passed like water, one replacing another without resistance. No accumulation, no memory required. The content did not ask to be remembered. It did not suggest sequence. Each moment stood alone, then vanished. Scrolling became a current, not fast, not slow, steady. You could enter it at any point. You could leave at any point. Nothing marked these transitions. There was no sense of progress, no sense of delay, just motion. This motion changed how time was perceived. Minutes no longer felt distinct. They did not separate cleanly. They blended. You could not say when something began because nothing announced itself. You could not say when it ended because nothing concluded. The phone did not show edges. It showed continuation. The night reflected this softness. Without clocks nearby, time became less assertive. The room was dark. The phone glowed quietly. There were no reminders of hours passing, no bells, no chimes. The night stretched without markers. It did not feel long. It did not feel short. It felt open. This openness was not dramatic. It was subtle. You were awake, but not fully alert. Tired, but not asleep. Restless, but not restless enough to change position. The body hovered. Fatigue appeared without resolution. You felt tired. But sleep did not arrive. Not because something blocked it, because nothing invited it strongly enough. The phone did not demand wakefulness, but it did not encourage sleep either. It existed in between. This in-between state dissolved boundaries further. The body did not receive clear instructions. The mind did not either. There was no signal that said, now. Just continuation. Scrolling did not feel like doing something. It felt like letting something happen. Your finger moved occasionally, not decisively, almost experimentally. A small motion to keep the current going. The movement did not change direction. It maintained flow. This flow removed friction. Without friction, time lost resistance. It slid. You could not hold on to it. You could not feel it passing in units. It passed as texture, smooth, uninterrupted. The absence of beginning meant there was no anticipation. The absence of ending meant there was no relief. Just presence, extended, quiet. The phone did not rush. It did not pause. It remained consistent. Consistency removed urgency. Urgency is what sharpens time. Without it, hours blur. The night without edges did not feel threatening. It felt suspended, like floating. The body felt heavy, limbs relaxed. The eyes grew dry. Blinking slowed. But sleep did not arrive decisively. Instead, there was a slow accumulation of tiredness, not exhaustion, weariness, a dull heaviness that did not resolve. This weariness existed alongside motion. The phone kept moving. The screen kept offering, not newness, just more. This more had no direction. It did not lead anywhere. It did not promise arrival. It simply continued. Without edges, time stopped feeling linear. It felt circular, or perhaps flat. You could not tell how long you had been there. You could not tell how much longer you would remain. This uncertainty did not cause anxiety. It caused detachment. The need to measure time faded. You stopped asking how late it was. Late compared to what? There was no tomorrow pressing in. No morning visible yet. The night was all that existed, and the night had no corners. In this space, clocks felt intrusive. Numbers felt sharp. The phone did not insist on them. Time hid behind the screen. Present, but not visible. This invisibility softened responsibility. You were not choosing to stay awake. You were simply still there. The distinction mattered. Choice implies effort. This state required none. Scrolling did not demand intention. It asked only for continuation. This continuation became neutral. Not good, not bad, just ongoing. The mind adapted to this neutrality. Thoughts slowed, not stopped. They drifted. Ideas arose and dissolved without being followed. Nothing needed completion. This incompleteness became comfortable. The absence of edges removed pressure. Without a clear end, nothing needed to finish. Without a clear beginning, nothing needed preparation. Everything existed in the middle. The middle is quiet. The middle has no demands. The phone made the middle endless. Not infinite, just extended. The night stretched accordingly. You were awake in a way that did not feel active. You were resting in a way that did not feel complete. This ambiguous state held you gently. The body recognized fatigue, but did not act on it. Sleep is an action, letting go. Here, letting go was postponed, not resisted, just delayed. The phone did not oppose sleep. It did not argue with it. It simply did not highlight it. The screen stayed awake quietly. The room stayed dark. Nothing shifted. This stillness made it easy to remain as you were. Without edges, there was no push to move forward, no pull backward, just suspension. Time softened, lost urgency. It became background, like the phone had earlier, not absent, just unmarked. The night without clocks felt wider, not longer, wider. There was room inside it, room to be awake without purpose, room to be tired without rest, room to exist without transition. This room was not uncomfortable. It was unfamiliar. Humans are used to edges. Beginnings reassure. Endings resolve. The middle is less certain. But here, the middle extended long enough to feel stable. The body adjusted. Breathing deepened. Muscles slackened. The mind stopped checking itself. There was nothing to check against. No schedule. No endpoint. The phone did not remind you of tomorrow. It did not remind you of yesterday. It held only now. And now was quiet. Scrolling continued. The current did not speed up. It did not slow. It remained. You could leave at any moment. But there was no reason to. Not because you were trapped, because you were unheld. The absence of edges created a floating state. Not asleep, not fully awake. A long dusk, or a long dawn. The night did not announce its passing. It did not transform. It stayed consistent. This consistency dulled awareness of duration. Minutes stopped feeling separate. They merged. Fatigue deepened, but without climax. No moment where the body demanded rest, just increasing softness. The phone remained a companion to this softness. It did not anchor you. It did not guide you. It simply stayed visible, a gentle reference point. When eyes closed briefly, the screen still glowed behind lids, not sharp, diffuse. When eyes opened again, nothing had changed. This repetition removed surprise. Without surprise, alertness faded. The night continued without edges. Eventually, something gave way. Not suddenly, not clearly. At some point, the body crossed a threshold without noticing. Sleep arrived without ceremony. No final gesture, no conscious decision. The current carried you past awareness. The phone may have stayed on or turned off. It did not matter, because by then, time had fully dissolved. There was no before, there was no after, only rest. And when morning eventually arrived, it felt distant, as if it belonged to another timeline. The night, without edges, had held you completely. Not dramatically, not forcefully, just long enough. Time, softened, had done what it does when it is no longer measured. It allowed the body to stop trying to keep up. And in that absence of edges, sleep finally found a way in. the screen goes dark. Not dramatically, not with meaning, just off. A small gesture precedes it. A thumb presses, or a finger rests for a second longer than before. Sometimes there is intention, sometimes only habit. The movement is minimal, almost nothing, and yet the room changes. Immediately, the light disappears, not fades, not softens. It is simply gone. The dark returns to its previous depth. Shadows recover their place. The ceiling retreats. The corners loosen. The phone no longer defines space. The room does. Silence returns. Not because sound stops, but because nothing is being added anymore. No movement, no visual rhythm. Just the quiet that was already there, waiting. The body notices first. Eyes relax. The muscles around them let go. There is no longer anything to follow. No gentle motion, no drifting images. The mind pauses. For a brief moment, there is nothing to attach to. This moment is small, but it matters. The phone, now dark, loses its presence. It still exists, but differently. It no longer acts. It no longer responds. It becomes weight again. Shape, material, glass, metal, plastic, an object. The hand feels this. The screen is cool, smooth, unlit. It does not look back. The phone does not reflect anything anymore. It does not mirror thought. It does not offer continuation. It rests. The room breathes. Air moves quietly. The faint sounds that were hidden return. A distant hum, fabric shifting, breathing. These sounds were always there, but now they are not competing. They are alone. The absence of the screen makes them clearer, not louder, clearer. The room feels larger again, not because it changed, because nothing is narrowing attention. The walls regain distance. The bed feels wider. The night expands. The phone is set down, or already was. On the table, on the bed, in the hand. Wherever it rests, it no longer claims that place. It occupies it passively, like any other object. A book closed, a cup empty, a lamp switched off. The gesture of turning the screen off carries finality. Not the finality of an ending, the finality of pause. Nothing continues. Nothing waits behind the surface. The screen does not hold unfinished movement anymore. It does not suggest return. It does not promise more. This absence is quiet. It does not feel like loss. It feels like completion. The mind registers this. Something has stopped, not interrupted, concluded. This allows thoughts to settle. They do not need to keep pace. They slow. Some dissolve immediately. Others linger briefly, then soften. The room now exists without overlay. No additional layer of light, no external rhythm, just space. Dark space. The eyes adjust. At first, they see almost nothing. Then slowly, outlines return. A faint shape of furniture. A line where wall meets ceiling. Nothing detailed. Enough. The body relaxes further. There is no longer a reason to hold still for viewing. You can move freely, turn, stretch, sink. The phone does not resist. It does not wake. It stays dark. This darkness changes its meaning. The phone no longer feels like a portal. It feels like a thing, contained, finite, harmless. It does not lead anywhere now. It does not connect. It does not extend presence. It ends at its edges. The night feels thicker, more complete. The quiet deepens. Not absolute silence, living silence, the kind that belongs to rooms at rest. The mind notices the difference between active quiet and passive quiet. Active quiet has expectation. Passive quiet does not. This is passive quiet. Nothing is expected. Nothing is required. The phone does not ask to be checked again. It does not glow. It does not pulse. It does not remind. It simply exists. Because it does nothing, it fades. Not physically, psychologically. The phone leaves attention. Attention spreads or collapses inward. Both feel similar. The room reasserts itself. The bed supports weight more noticeably. Gravity becomes clear again. The body sinks. The temperature of the room is felt, cool, neutral, stable. These sensations were muted before. Now they return. The night regains authority. It is no longer sharing space with a moving light. It stands alone. The phone, now dark, cannot compete. It does not try. The stillness grows. Thoughts slow further. They lose structure. They stop forming sentences. Images blur. Memory fragments loosen. The mind is no longer fed. It begins to turn inward, not searching, resting. The moment after the screen goes dark is delicate. It does not last long, but it creates a threshold, a clear before, a clear after. Before, something was happening. After, nothing needs to. This threshold is gentle. It does not push. It invites. Sleep does not arrive immediately. It does not need to. The body is allowed to exist without input, without stimulation, without continuation. The phone is now fully an object among objects. It does not hold attention, does not define time. It does not shape the room. It lies where it lies, the same as everything else. This equality matters. Nothing in the room is more important than anything else. The hierarchy collapses. The room becomes neutral again. This neutrality is calming. There is no focal point, no anchor. Attention floats. Breathing deepens. Exhalations lengthen. The body prepares without instruction. The phone remains dark. If you were to open your eyes now, you would not see it calling. If you were to reach for it, it would not respond. This resistance is important. It confirms closure. The mind accepts it. The night continues, uninterrupted. The phone does not reinsert itself. It stays silent. The object is finished for now. The day does not extend past this moment. The night does not carry anything forward. It holds nothing, just darkness, just space, just rest. Eventually, the body crosses into sleep, not marked, not announced. No gesture accompanies it. The phone does not witness it. It does not record it. It remains where it is, dark, still, an object again. And the room, fully itself once more, holds everything quietly. Nothing glows, nothing moves, nothing asks. Only night remains. And that is enough. The smartphone remains, not awake, not alert, not waiting in any active way. It lies where it was left, on a table, on a shelf, on the edge of a bed. It does not move. It does not glow. It does not suggest anything. Without touch, it is silent, completely. It does not hum. It does not breathe. It does not pulse beneath the surface. It is only weight, only shape, only material. Glass resting against wood, metal against fabric, plastic against skin, if it is still in a hand. An object among other objects. This is easy to forget during the day, but at night it becomes clear. When nothing is happening, the phone does nothing too. It does not create activity on its own. It does not continue without permission. It requires contact, a finger, a palm, a small decision. Without that, it stays exactly as it is. The night does not depend on it. The darkness does not wait for it. The room does not change around it. The phone does not fill space by itself. It occupies it quietly, like a book that has been closed, like a lamp that has been switched off. Its presence is passive, neutral. The night continues. Silence settles again into its natural shape, not forced, not imposed, just present. The silence that existed before screens existed, the silence that never left. It was only covered for a while. Now it is uncovered again. The smartphone does not resist this. It does not try to reclaim attention. It does not wake itself. It does not argue. It accepts stillness easily. This acceptance is important. It reminds you that the phone does not have intention. It does not want anything. It does not seek. It does not miss. It does not replace. It waits. Waiting without expectation. The night holds the room. The walls return to being walls. The ceiling becomes only a surface again. The floor stops being a distance to cross. Everything returns to itself. The phone is included in this return. It is no longer special, no longer central, just one thing among many. The body senses this equality. There is no focal point demanding attention, no small light pulling awareness, nothing to track, nothing to follow. Breathing deepens. The body recognizes the absence of demand. This absence is calming. It signals safety. Nothing needs to be monitored. Nothing needs to be finished. The phone does not hold unfinished business anymore. It does not store urgency. It does not carry tension. It holds nothing at all. It is empty until touched. This emptiness is not loss. It is potential, but potential that remains dormant. The night does not rush toward that potential. It does not care. The night existed before the phone. It will exist after it. The silence in the room is not fragile. It is resilient. It returns easily. It was never destroyed, only interrupted. Now it fills the space again, without effort. The phone lies within this silence. It does not break it. It does not disturb it. It belongs to it. The object remains, but the night remains more fully. This is the quiet truth. The smartphone did not take the night away. It only shared space with it for a while. And when it stopped, the night did not protest. It simply continued. The darkness is patient. It does not compete. It does not announce itself. It waits behind light. And when light leaves, darkness steps forward without comment. The phone understands this in its own way. When it is dark too. When it is still too. It mirrors the room rather than leading it. This is what remains when everything else is stripped away. A room, a body, a night, and an object that does nothing unless asked. The phone has no presence without attention, no meaning without use, no activity without touch. This returns control gently to the room, to the body, to time. Nothing is extended beyond necessity. Nothing is carried forward. The night closes naturally, not because something ended, but because nothing continues. The phone does not argue with this closure. It does not reopen itself. It does not insist. It waits, waiting without urgency, waiting without awareness, waiting as objects do. The silence does not feel empty. It feels complete, complete enough to hold sleep, complete enough to hold stillness, complete enough to exist on its own. The phone rests inside that completeness, contained, quiet, inactive. The night does not depend on technology to be itself. It does not need illumination. It does not need movement. It does not need narrative. It holds everything without effort. The smartphone, for all its capacity, does not change this. When it is off, it is small, limited, finite. It occupies only the space it touches. It does not expand beyond its edges. This finiteness is grounding. It reminds you that the phone is not the world. It is not time. It is not night. It is a thing. And like all things, it rests when not in use. The room is not waiting for the phone. The phone is waiting for the room. Or rather, it is waiting for nothing in particular. It simply exists. The night does not miss the screen. It does not feel its absence. It has always been sufficient. Silence does not disappear forever. It returns as soon as nothing interrupts it. The phone does not prevent this. It allows it by being inactive, by being still, by being ordinary. The smartphone becomes what it always was beneath everything else. An object, useful when touched, irrelevant when not. This realization is quiet. It does not demand action. It does not suggest change. It simply settles. The room holds it. The night surrounds it. The body drifts. Nothing else is required. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added. The smartphone did not replace the night. It only waited for someone to touch it. And now, untouched, it waits quietly while the night continues, as it always has, as it always will.